when we get to, if you get quite large questions from the crowd, I know you might not be great, but you'll have to stand up and walk out and then. Oh, that's good. Yeah, five seats in a row. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, but hold in front of the monitor, sorry. Am I allowed to take a photo of the audience? Is there a policy on that?
Don't see any kids.
Hello everyone, is it alright if I take a photo of you? So put your hand up if you don't want me to take a photo of you. Right, hide now then. Right, we're not ready to start yet, I just wanted to do that.
You're looking at me very suspiciously. Hello everybody. How have you found OggCamp today? Pretty good? Excellent. My name is Andy, I'm just a dude in the crew, a person in the crew. I do have a question. Who drove here to Manchester today? Is anybody staying at or parked at the Palace NCP car park, staying at the Palace Hotel? No? Okay. Well, whoever has left their car parking ticket somewhere foolishly today is going to have an expensive fine later, I guess. But if you do happen to find the person, or anybody says, oh no, I lost my car parking ticket, then send them to me, because I might have it. It might be you. I have a car parking ticket. Did you get to there about 11:30-ish? Then I've probably got your car. I shall come and give it to you. One more thing. The speakers really appreciate it if you if you've used Joined In and fill in feedback on there. So if you haven't been doing that throughout the day and you've been to some good sessions or just been to any sessions, then do go into Joined In and give some feedback, and that's really appreciated. Thank you. I'm going to get out of the way of this wonderful panel. I just wanted to come and reunite a person with their car parking ticket.
Hello, hello.
That works. It's going to do this the old-fashioned one. Hello, hello. That's okay.
Are you on that? I'm on the nearest one. Josh, should we totally get these things? Yeah. Come on.
We're in the middle.
We'll just sit here. You should totally take a photo from here. This looks too creepy. I know it has gone. Hi.
Do I need to vamp for a bit?
Yeah. Oh yes. Okay.
Already
We got
did.
a lovely photo of you all. Hello? This. Why
Mine's
does this
probably
mic
like-
go?
Yeah,
Got it, Josh?
yeah, I think that'll do.
Sorry, yeah, let's just do this. Should we hold them and just be rebels?
Yeah.
Right, just going to give them a quick tip here. If you hold it like by your chin,
Yeah,
then
it's better.
then you, yeah.
Thank you.
And so yeah, when you come to speak, just hold it up sort of there-ish, and you should be sounding good.
Dan, get on the stage.
I really need one of those. Hang on, there we go. I really need one of those fancy, like remote mixing apps things. Okay.
Right, ready to start then?
Yeah, we are recording.
Right, hello everyone, and welcome to the OggCamp19 panel! Before we start, I just want to say a quick thank you to the sponsors, Entroware, IBM, Ubuntu,
Yeah.
OpenSUSE, and 8 Circles. Yeah, thank you to all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, give them a round of applause. I'm Joel Ressington. I produce, host, and edit podcasts for Jupiter Broadcasting, which is part of Linux Academy. And the panel before you are Caroline Keep.
Hi, Caroline Keep. How do I describe myself? Founder of MakeFest, the biggest digital making festival in the UK, first school makerspace in the UK, and I do a podcast with Dan. Oh,
Which is
we
a
can
little
talk
bit.
about that in a minute.
It's a little bit of a dirty podcast, not safe for work.
It wouldn't pass the code of conduct, I'll tell you that.
No.
And Josh Lowe.
Yeah, hi, I'm Josh, and I create EachBox, which is a drag and drop version of Python. It's quite popular somehow. I'm also a co-host of Mintcast, so you might have heard me on that. And we talk about Linux, specifically Linux Mint. So that's a lot of fun. So yeah, that's what I do.
My first Linux podcast was Mintcast, so you're carrying on in the good tradition. We've got Dr. Laura Carey.
Is there a doctor in the house?
So I'm a developer advocate at IBM in open source software, and I've just finished my PhD in environmental psychology. And I was a regular presenter on the Ubuntu podcast for about 7 seasons.
But then you left to become a doctor.
I've left to finish the doctorate.
Yeah, and some bloke called Dan Lynch, I think, at the end.
Yeah, I'm here for the trivia round, music, sport, TV, anything you want to ask me about that. Yeah, so I'm Dan. I used to be on Linux Outlaws, you probably know that. I do Floss Weekly sometimes with Simon, who's probably around somewhere. Ask me what you like. I'll try and answer it.
Yeah, so this is going to be questions-based. We had some questions submitted in advance. We'll get through them, and if we have time, we might have some questions from the audience. We'll have to see how it goes. So the first question then is, what's your best OggCamp memory? Let's start with Laura. You've been to quite a few of these. What's your best memory from OggCamp?
Not expecting anybody to turn up, and then looking down the staircase at the Connaught Hotel where we had it, and there being like 75 people queuing up the staircase, which was just amazing. And that was just my best OggCamp memory.
Nice. What about you, Dan?
That's a really good one, actually. Yeah, that was great that people showed up. It's great that all of you
I
have
think
showed
you were
up.
stuck in a lift at the time.
Yeah. So that's probably one of my favourites. I've got loads, I won't go on. But yeah, I got stuck in a lift at the first one. I got a van full of pizza during the 2012 one. That was quite fun. Picture of me somewhere with a van full of pizza, not eating it. Yeah, I think that's probably it. And oh, actually, I'm going to, a bit of flagrant self-promotion, I'm going to mention my favourite moment was getting Stephen Fry to do a talk. I was quite pleased with that.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
No, stop it, you. I don't like to mention it, although I just have.
He didn't answer my question, though, so...
Do you want me to do mine? Mine's got to be, I organised the exhibition in 2015, and my favourite's got to be trying to get the Quantum Technology Club a giant antenna radio for outside of the building. And
So-
it was huge. It was like this giant radio.
Yeah,
We had to just
yeah.
put it outside.
So, very quickly for context, we had a group there who do ham radio stuff. And they were like, can we bring our antenna? And we said, yeah, bring your antenna. They brought their antenna. It was 30 feet tall. And they wanted to stick it on the roof of the building. And the manager of the building went, no.
So we
and
had
that
to
was
kind
it.
of, we made
Health
do
and
by
safety
putting it
says
outside,
no.
didn't we?
Yeah.
So, Josh, you're going to have to rack your brains here from all of the one OggCamp you've been to.
So this is my first time. It's been quite good. So it's probably I think having the kids track is quite good because it kind of brings that new perspective. Because at the end of the day, it'd be quite cool in 20 years' time to have some people sat here at OggCamp, whatever year that will be. So I think. Getting people into Linux at a young age and open source and kind of making that connection and hopefully doing it through the kids track at events like this is quite cool, so yeah.
Oh, excellent. Well, that segues nicely into our second question, which is, what do you see as the main barriers for young people using Linux or FOSS?
Who's going to answer this?
Why are you all looking at me?
Does this
the whole panel just turned this way.
Is this me and you, Josh, this one?
Yeah, do you want me to start? Or?
You can start and I'll round.
So I'll start with Linux. So I think it's mainly awareness. The fact that like kids, if they're going to buy a laptop, they'll either go for a Windows machine or a Mac if they really want to spend money on Apple stuff for some reason. So I think it's mainly awareness from one perspective, but another issue is that like kids need the fastest machine on the planet, and like when they have an old laptop, that'll probably just go in the bin, and they don't realize that that laptop can actually have a new life with like Linux. So definitely awareness is a huge barrier with getting young people into it. I think if I ask people at school if they've ever heard of Linux before, maybe 2 people in the whole year group, and we have 180 kids, will have heard of it or even used it. Open source software, maybe there's just a stigma attached to it that, oh, it doesn't look that good, but I use some really good open source software, and I think maybe kids just don't realize that free software, they actually use it all the time. So a barrier is maybe just awareness with both of them really, with young people.
Yeah, do you know people who use OBS, for example?
Yeah, there's probably loads of streamers that are kids my age that use it and don't really know.
Gamers love it, don't they? All the game streamers.
But presumably they only know it's free as in beer rather than free as in freedom then.
Yeah.
I'd probably add to that. So I can say that from a school perspective, we're pretty lucky to have, you know, I'm the founder of the first makerspace in the school. So I actually have a session where we introduce open source and what open source is and the difference between free and freedom, and also what software is out there that you can use. So our kids tend to pick it up much more, but I think that's exposure. So being able to have those kinds of conversations within schools is a really important thing to have going forward. So
the non-teachers or students, any comments on this?
What about the doctor? You got anything to say?
I've no idea.
Second opinion? Sorry, I'm going to make doctor jokes all day.
You hang out with me enough. You should have an opinion on this.
On what, young people getting into open source. I think it's probably awareness, yeah. I mean, I don't want to just, you know, say the same as everyone else, but I think it's a lot to do with awareness. Like you said about OBS is massive for like game streaming. Loads of people I know, my nephews are massively into like streaming gaming sessions, watching what other people doing it, and they all use OBS because, as you say, it's free as in beer. It is free as in freedom as well, and you can get the source code, but people don't know that often. They just know that they can connect it to Twitch or whatever they're going to use. So maybe it's about awareness and seeing that people can get. We need to advocate more for, you know, write plugins for it, you know, do things like that.
Yeah. What about barriers for young people getting into tech generally?
That I'd probably say is the same. Tech in generally is not really catered for at the moment. I don't think for the competence that you could have, the real engagement that you need, you know, the types that Josh would be a perfect example of, isn't really there in schools. The average amount of time that students are spending doing computer science overall is decreasing in comparison to what it was 5 years ago in ICT. The numbers are going down, they're not going up. We're putting a lot of funding into it, but not a lot's coming out of it. And it's probably because it's been done in such a prescriptive way that it's not quite the creative and interesting and engaging thing we need it to be. You know, we've done a lot of stuff. Joss has done many make fests, and it's kind of, you get a project that you really like and you're totally enthusiastic about it, and you get really into it and you build it, and that's how you develop those skills. It's not necessarily do this task and regurgitate it on screen, and then do this task and then regurgitate it. So you makerspaces, and there are many of them popping up. Pat Links, Neston, plenty of them behind me. That are coming together now to offer those particular type of skills for young people, to really get them engaged in their own projects, their own learning, their own open source projects.
Because at the moment, you know, if you look at the tech that kids have access to compared to when we were kids, they've got so much more access, but it's generally more of a kind of consuming, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kids are very led down one direction. I was having a good conversation a minute ago with some of the guys from the Open Rights group. The school environment is very much being driven towards a sort of a consumer base. A lot of the major tech firms invest in schools, they're putting stuff into schools, but it's very much use our technology and use it frequently, but don't get inside the code.
Have you just unplugged something?
Have I just unplugged myself? No, there we go. Don't be able to see what it is, don't be able to look at it, you know, don't be able to do anything with it because we want you to consume it. So really, being able to take something apart and see what it's made of is an essential skill, and our generation, I think, did have a lot of that. You know, there were a lot of open source projects. You could hack into something.
A lot of it didn't work. That was the
I know,
problem.
but that's not the point.
You'd be there like trying to load a ZX Spectrum game, and like it doesn't work.
I know. But at least that was an option for young people.
Yeah.
It wasn't screen-based. You can't get into it. It's
Yeah, that's
proprietary. You can't access it. Now a lot of it is screen-based, proprietary. You can't access it. So I think that shift's happened, and now we've kind of got to shift back.
Isn't it a case, though, that not everyone, you know, not all kids have the inclination for it?
No, that's fine. Not all the kids have the inclination for art, but we still do that.
Yeah, fair enough. Because there's an experiment that I like to do when I have a group of people together, especially Linux people. Everyone put your hand up if, when you were a kid, you looked inside the toilet cistern to see how it worked.
Yeah.
Almost everyone.
50% of the panel, but not all of us.
Yeah, almost everyone. And, you know, I think that there's, well, obviously there's more than two types of people, but, you know, I break it down to people who did look in the cistern and people who didn't. And you'd probably find that the kids who are enthusiastic do that because they want to know how things work. Right?
I think with that one, not to go on about it, I think it's exposure. So I teach, you know, last week I was doing robotics. Some of my girls were well into it last week, and they really love the robotics. Some of my lads, not so much. You get different genders, different mixes. Some of my girls like wearable tech. Some of them really love 3D printing. Some of them hate it. Some of them are very much into open source projects. Some of them really like Linux. Some of them really like Raspberry Pi. But they have the option with ours where they all get exposure and they can all pursue it at their rate. And that's the difference. I think with majority of schools, as I said, most of them get exposure to art. Not all of us are. I'm certainly not artistic, but I still got art lessons. You know, so having a series where you can expose kids to a range of technologies so that they can be pick for themselves. You know, they're more than smart enough to be able to pick their own choices.
Yeah, I think going back to the school point of kids, well, computer science and coding and tech just is not done right in schools. I really don't want to turn this into a political debate, but we all know who's to blame for that.
Are you going to blame the Tories?
So
it's not a good debate to get into with us two on this panel.
Mention the B word.
I think that the way computer science is taught at my age, so GCSE, is just boring. It is not taught right. It's not the teacher's fault, it's the curriculum. The curriculum's just not fit for purpose. It needs to change, and that is why we're seeing the numbers dropping. And it gets frustrating as someone who likes tech and likes coding and likes computers, to see every single year the same BBC News article coming out saying, oh, numbers have dropped in computer science. And then you actually look at the past year and you think, well, what have they actually changed about it? You know, the same article's been released like for the past 3 years, yet nothing's actually been changed. So I proposed the idea on Twitter of making like a project-based curriculum where kids have 10 projects, let's say, in the 2-year course, and they apply the theory side, like binary and that, is important, but why not apply that into projects that kids will actually be engaged with? And then we might see a increase in numbers, but the Department for Education probably won't listen to me because I'm a 15-year-old. That's
They
my
should.
idea anyway.
Yeah, they definitely should.
I'll add to that, if you are a school out there, just open yourself a makerspace, run it onside your curriculum. You know, that's the way to get around this. Just open a makerspace, set yourself a digital program, and run it alongside your GCSEs is the best way to do that, and that does increase your numbers.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, that segues nicely into the next one. This is going pretty well. What are the panelists' favourite Raspberry Pi projects? So, Laura, what's your favourite Raspberry Pi project? I assume you have got at least one.
Yeah, I've not done projects with Raspberry Pis. I've used it as a server in the house, but not for specific things. I guess I've done more with Arduinos.
All right. Well, what's your favourite Arduino then?
I have two.
Yeah.
Well, one of them, we went to a wedding last year and they had a competition of fascinators. Never worn a fascinator ever. It's the weird thing that women put on their head at weddings.
It's like sort of a hat, but not.
Sort of a hat, but not. So we made an LED one that was Wi-Fi connected,
Nice.
which is quite cool.
What's the other one then?
That was Jedi lights. So along the back of my headboard, so I'd had a light that could switch on easily, and you just wave your hand and the lights came on,
Nice.
and it went rainbow colours.
Excellent. What about you, Dan?
That does sound excellent. I haven't done anything that exciting compared to this. Mine are kind of boring. I've got about 3 Raspberry Pis at home. One of them's an OpenVPN server, so that'd be one of my favourite projects. Although that really I can't take any credit for because I use PyVPN, which you just enter a command and let it like curl a bash thing in, which is probably incredibly insecure.
Yeah, then run it as root.
And then they run it as from the Chinese government. Yeah. So I've got that. It's one of my favourites. And then other ones. I don't know. I failed at a lot of Raspberry Pi projects, to be honest. I tried to make a Pycroft, which the Mycroft voice thing, which once had Popey's voice, I believe.
Did it tell you what beans were?
It failed for some reason, and I never got back to doing it again. But mine are probably quite basic. I use them mainly for home servers, like Laura was saying. I'm going to stick with the OpenVPN project because I do use that a lot actually to dial into my home network, and it just runs, and it uses hardly any electricity, and it's quiet, and it's good.
Fair enough. Josh?
So one project is not necessarily my project, but the Primaroni Picade kit that they've made. I think that's just such a unique use of the Raspberry Pi that like you can build your own like model-size arcade cabinet and like play really retro games. Obviously, like I know none of them, but yeah, I just think that's a really cool application of it, and it's kind of like a hybrid between the Micbit and a Raspberry Pi project. But Lorraine Underwood, you might have seen it on Twitter. It kind of went viral about a year ago. She built an 8x8 LED cube, not like one that size, but it was out of ping pong balls and copper rods, and it was controlled by the Raspberry Pi or the Micbit. I think these are ways to show that like the Raspberry Pi and things like it can be applied to such big projects, but they can be made so much easier to control with like the Raspberry Pi. So they're really 2 cool projects that I've seen with it.
Presumably you use a lot of Raspberry Pis then, Caroline?
Yeah, I use loads, but I try not to preference a project because we've always got about 30 going on in the space at any one point. So I'm going to be, some of the projects I've seen over the years, not any of the current ones that are ongoing. I think I've seen quite a lot, lots of robotics projects. Lots of robots. We get robots all the time being built in Raspberry Pi. I really like when we see ones that are for what am I trying to say here? Sonic Pi. A lot of our kids use Sonic Pi in music. I love watching them use music with Sonic Pi. It's really nice. I've seen IoT-based builds. I've seen a Minecraft in our space. If you want our kids to help you with that.
I could probably use it, yeah.
Yeah, Dan could probably use it. We've got a few of those projects that are going on there, really nice. We've seen weather station-based projects. We've seen a weather station-based project that was IoT that tweeted our weather. We've seen loads and loads of them. Our kids use them quite prolifically. So camera trap projects, like I'm getting this moment in the crowd where people are going, oh, that project that I've seen in your space. So yeah, camera trap projects where we capture data. A bunch of my kids. One of them wants to work at the moment, which is one of those projects I've got to get around to, where I need to source a beehive. For apparently, I always get asked, if anybody's got either that or a vending machine, anybody who's got a vending machine, you know, like a big one, like one of those, I need one of them apparently. So I get asked things like, Miss, can you find me a vending machine? Because we want to hack it with a Raspberry Pi. Or, Miss, can you find me a beehive? Because we want to set up an ecosystem with a Raspberry Pi. So quite often I get the big project, and then we have to kind of figure out exactly how we're going to do it. So it's really cool.
Do you find that sometimes you have to kind of temper their expectations?
Always. Always. Quite often you have that moment where they'll say a project. I mean, we're quite lucky. The first thing we teach our lot is to project manage and design think it through. And that is a really crucial skill with young people, because if you just put them in a room full of kit, then you end up with this moment where they come back to you and they go, oh, I've got this idea, and the idea is way, way bigger than you'd imagine it to be. And then you've got to basically go, right, how's the stages we're going to do that? But that's why we run it 5 years. So a kid could turn up in year 7 and work 5 years straight on a project with us. So that's why we made it, so that they could do that. So yeah, we've got a couple of ones at the moment who are working on braces for 3D printed. They want to put sensors in them. That's a really nice one. And a few of them trying to do stuff on coral at the moment, in making coral more sustainable in oceans somehow, and sensors that they could monitor coral. So yeah, the big problems, but we've got 5 years, they can work through them. That's the whole point.
Nice.
And in fairness, I've only been on my Pycroft project for 1 year, so I've got 4 left.
Yeah.
It'll work in 4 years.
We'll hold you to that. Right, so we had quite a long question, which I've had to cut down and summarize. But the crux of it is, what can our communities do to become more accessible? And the person asking the question was talking about how websites are very rarely accessible. And I think probably all of us on the panel have got a website. I've never even thought about making it accessible. But it can become a broader question beyond just websites. I mean, just events generally. What can we do to make them more accessible? Dan, you've been organising events for a while. Mm-hmm. Is accessibility something that you think about? I mean, it's the person asking the question said it's often an afterthought.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I think about, and we try really hard to make a part of OggCamp that we always have. We've had some challenges with that, and to be honest, it's going to sound like I'm passing the buck here, but sometimes you find that, and this is my fault probably for not being able to find the right venue. Sometimes we've had to use a certain venue, and it hasn't been as accessible as it could have been. And then it's like they haven't thought about accessibility, or they've tried to hack it on by like building a ramp somewhere that doesn't really work and things like that. It's a tough one. I mean, in terms of web stuff, I should do more, I admit, for things to test sites on things like screen readers, particularly. Yeah. So I did do that. I used to work. I always say this, but it's like I've got you could make a soundboard of things I say. One of them is I used to work for the NHS. So when I worked for the NHS, we did websites, and we did actually about 15 years ago. We did actually test them all with screen readers. But that had nothing to do with any of our management or anyone else. It was because one of the guys in our very small dev team introduced me to screen readers and was very personally kind of invested in that. And we chose to do that, and it was great. And we tested every site. We made sure you could listen. We used things like Orca and other things to test that you could use a screen reader. So I'm sure most people probably know, but a screen reader in this sense is something that will read the text from the website to you.
Did you test it with the screen off? I mean, it sounds like a funny thing to say, but...
Yeah. No, we didn't. Well, usually there was a couple of us, and one of us would be on one side of the desk and one was on the other. So one could see the screen and one couldn't.
Right.
So you'd know if they'd try and see if they could work out what was going on effectively.
Did you test it without a mouse?
Did we test it without a mouse? Probably not, you know. I'm trying to think. Yeah, because you wouldn't see the pointer. No, we did test it without a mouse, because you wouldn't. So screen readers usually have keyboard-only control, don't they? Because, yeah, good point.
Yeah, and of course accessibility isn't just about visual impairment as well.
Yeah.
You know, there's people who have limited mobility and stuff, and you know, can only use a keyboard or whatever. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one. I don't have a great answer for this, unfortunately. I think we could all do more, would be my kind of thing. I know I could probably do more, but it is something that needs to be thought of more immediately, I suppose, and not an afterthought, as you said. That is a really important thing. It's not been an afterthought, hopefully. People haven't found that in things like OggCamp. We try really hard to make everywhere accessible. When we came to check the venue, I did check everywhere that, you know, you had wheelchair access, you had all these other sort of things that you would need. It's not as great as it could be, I'll be honest, but it works, it's pretty good. So we did check things like that, but it's an ongoing thing, and it should be more just I think it's a lot to do with regulations now, so all venues now, I mean, any public building has to have a certain amount of certainly physical access and accessibility and stuff. That's in the law, and a lot of them still don't comply with that. I don't know how they get away with it, but I've been to a few that don't have like corridors wide enough to get a wheelchair in at points. But it's just because they're so old. They're like, the building was built before that was a problem, apparently. So I don't know. But yeah, I haven't got a hard and fast answer. But yes, we definitely try for OggCamp and other events.
So Laura, you are involved with developer advocacy, not necessarily at work, but have you noticed any focus on that? You know, when you go to events, you know, where people are, you know, like DevRelCon and stuff like that, does accessibility ever come up there?
I have no idea.
Well, that speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Well, I don't go to so many events. I tend to be on the more the content side of things, but
right.
I don't tend to do the like web implementation stuff.
Okay.
But the web teams that I do work with, they do all the accessibility testing and things.
All right, so it's
just what.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're back.
It's just what you do, I think. But yeah, I don't personally. I used to be involved more in accessibility stuff when I was in UX, but for years, I've not done very much for a long time other than PhD.
Fair enough.
PhD is probably enough to deal with in one amount of time, really, isn't it?
Yeah. So these are things that used to be high in my head and now are just not.
Is it something you ever think about, Josh?
Yes, so EachBox, which is the software that I make, it's a visual drag and drop coding tool. So basically the whole thing is visual UI elements, and you really have to think every decision you make. What happens if I move this button to the bottom right hand corner of the screen? What is that going to affect the person using it? And because it's used in schools, you've really got to think everything you kind of anything to like the main website, the resources design, the app design, anything like that. You kind of have to think about accessibility. And obviously when you're dealing with like a color palette which has like 30 different colors on it, you have to go through and see, well, which color is going to work for this person with color blindness, and how might that affect the use of the program. So I was actually lucky in the fact that I had a design team approach me and say, do you want a new branding pack as a sponsorship thing? And they actually went through and sorted all the accessibility stuff for me, which was quite good. So yeah, I have dealt with that quite a lot, and it's something that I think about daily, basically, when I'm doing stuff.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Do you want me to answer this one?
Yeah, if you like.
Well, I use Josh's stuff. It's perfect for accessibility. I guess there's two things. I do it in teaching, but I do it in MakeFest, don't I? In fact, Dan, you do it in MakeFest, but you don't realise it as well.
What's that, sorry?
Accessibility.
Okay, yeah.
So when we run my festival, which is slightly, it's the biggest digital festival, because it's in a library, in Liverpool Library once a year, we have to think very, very closely about accessibility. And obviously come under the library regulations and guidance, and we do a lot for inclusion in that. So things like wheelchair access, but also things like what fonts we're using on things for dyslexia and dyspraxia, what colour palette is involved in virtual things so that it's visual and permanent and it can come across, and how each activity, we assess them so we can see that they're inclusive of everybody, and we tend to give a little bit of guidance on each one to say what age group or what area we think could be appropriate for each one. So it's pretty much at the forefront when I think about things. And obviously teaching, as Josh said, you'll have thought about this long and hard. You have to make sure it absolutely encompasses every type of student you're going to come across. So it's right up the top there, but education it would be.
All right, that's good to hear. Okay, anyone here work for Microsoft? Right, good.
Nobody is willing to admit it anyway.
So the next question is, does Microsoft hearting Linux concern you? And if so, are you considering using other FOSS operating systems instead of Linux? So yeah, do we think that Microsoft's love of Linux is a good thing or a bad thing, I suppose?
I'm curious to hear the arguments of it being a bad thing beyond just reaction to Microsoft.
Well, beyond the history.
Yeah, but specifically what? I mean, Microsoft's very different now from what it used to be.
Well, okay, right, let's have a show of hands from the audience. Okay, so Microsoft and their love and involvement with Linux, is it, will do good, meh, and bad. So broadly a good thing, hands up. Meh, and bad. So only a very small number of bad, the scattering of meh, and quite a lot of good.
I'm interested that you said, would it make, or the question, whoever asked the question said, would it make you use other FOSS operating systems? So are we talking BSD or something?
Well, I assume so, yeah.
So, without getting too kind of, without getting too difficult about it, if I was, why would I go to BSD when I've got an operating system that's under the GPL, which is protected by the GPL, and go to a BSD system with a BSD license where it could be taken and turned into Mac OS like it was before,
Yeah.
and all these other things? I don't think that's better or safer, in my opinion. Nothing wrong with BSD, it's great, but legally, it's definitely not safer. From a licensing point of view, I don't think, if you care about your stuff staying open source.
Yeah. Is Wimpy in? Have a drink, licensing mentioned on the panel.
Yay.
Josh, you use Linux a little bit.
Yes.
Are you worried by it?
I think it's a good thing. Going back to the second question that we talked about of young people barriers into Linux. You know, these people are using Windows, and if Microsoft are putting a subsystem for Linux in the operating system that these young people are already using, that's going to increase exposure to the Linux world, and maybe I just see it as a good thing, because I actually have been using it for the past few months, and from what I can see, it's not going to replace Linux, because, for example, what I use it for mainly is running a Node.js server so I can do the development for EduBox. But then when you build in the offline app, which is an Electron app to run on Linux, you can't do that on Windows and have the same level of testing because you need to test it on Linux. So it's always going to have its place, and I think it'll do good for Linux in the awareness side of things, with kids that aren't familiar with Linux, and kind of bringing that exposure through the operating system that they already use.
This is a hard one, this one, Dan. It's like, I think the nerves are there because I suspect of how Microsoft's rep used to be with the open source community. But I think me and Dan have said this before. I think that, you said to me a while back ago when we were debating this, I think that argument's gone. The open source community have sort of won that argument, I think. I think Microsoft has to come more on board with the open source community than fight it, really.
Yeah, and they have done.
Yeah, I think they have done, and I think they're changing. So I suspect the question is, you know, really, do you trust the change that's...
Well, yeah, and do you forgive them? Do you forgive them their sins?
So the issue
well,
is...
maybe.
The issue is to kind of play devil's advocate a little bit here, because it seems like everybody agrees almost on the panel, and I feel a bit bad because there's clearly people in the audience who feel strongly about it. The argument is, and I understand why, that in 2002, I'm going to roll it out again, Steve Ballmer came out and called Linux a cancer that needed to be eradicated, and all other stuff, and that was really offensive. To be called a cancer is quite an offensive thing, I would imagine. And so you need to be eradicated and all that. And I had friends who were personally hurt by that, and they took it personally for whatever reason. And I don't think they'd forgive him so quickly. But the difference is, in my opinion, that Microsoft isn't Steve Ballmer. He was the guy who was there at the time. He had an opinion, clearly a very strong one. He had a way of doing things, which it was like eradicate anybody who might be competition. But they've been under new management for a long time now, and they've changed a lot of their policies. I'm not saying they're perfect, because that nobody is, but they've changed a lot, and they've hired a lot of the top open source developers. And they're paying them to work in the same way that like Google and other people who seem to get a lot of love from a lot of the open source people who often aren't any better towards open source projects, if I'm honest. They get a lot of love for employing people who do Python for half of their time, like Guido van Rossum, and then do Google stuff in the rest of their time. Microsoft are doing that as well now. So if you agree with Google doing it, then you should be happy that Microsoft are doing it too.
I can probably say one thing, if you say that, then if you agree with Google doing it, you agree with Microsoft doing it, is that I see school databases, I see us all using different types of software in schools. I will say that having had a good look at how Microsoft use and how their views are on data privacy regarding students' information, I'm much happier with Microsoft than I am with Google. And I think that's where my line comes in for that. Do we really want all their information going out the door? So, that's how I see it. So maybe friendly skepticism. Can I have that?
I guess I'm curious of what people are worried about them doing, because I know the whole history side of things and whether you trust them and whether you can forgive and all that kind of thing. But what are people worried about them doing by declaring they love Linux?
I think... obviously, Microsoft, I don't know how long, it might have been a year and a half ago, bought out GitHub. And I remember when that was announced, everyone was like panicking, switching their accounts off, moving to GitLab. And then you look at the past year and a half and you think, Microsoft acquiring GitHub is and then the GitHub have added so many new features and put developers first in the past year and a half, I think they have ever done. And I go to a lot of Python events and PyCon. The PyCon America, their main sponsor is Microsoft. And before kind of Microsoft adopted the whole Linux and open source thing, you didn't really see Microsoft at all of these events. But now every one I go to, I can't remember an event that didn't have Microsoft as its main sponsor.
Yeah, very quickly on that point, sorry Josh, if anybody went to FOSDEM this year, FOSDEM, the biggest community, free software, open source community event in the world, huge, 10,000 odd people, the two sponsors were Google and Microsoft. Yeah. And I looked at that on the thing and I was like, what the? I was sat in a talk about data privacy and I opened the brochure and it said, Google, Microsoft, and I was like, oh.
And I think my opinion is that's what I've got my eye on more.
Yeah.
What's their attitudes towards that? Because I know Microsoft, I asked when I seen them at BET, the big educational conference, and they were very clear that their position is very much about we have a product and we want you to get this product, but we are very interested
Google
in protecting
Classroom,
your
isn't it, in that
data,
case?
whilst Google were less so.
Yeah. What about the idea that the management at Microsoft now are very friendly to us, and the direction of travel of Microsoft is positive, but that could easily change. And is that not something to be worried about?
Yeah, I think we, obviously, Microsoft could be playing all nice guy at the minute, and then in 2 or 3 years' time, they could just take advantage of the whole thing. But from what we've seen in the past few years, I don't think that'll happen, because Microsoft have kind of built up such a reputation within this community in such a acknowledgement as nice people and trying to do good for open source and Linux, that they kind of won't go back on the decision of being nice to everyone. So I don't think we should cross out the idea of Microsoft kind of like in a few years taking advantage, but like I really don't think they'll do it.
Yeah, they could absolutely change course, but the thing is that if they're contributing to the Linux kernel under the license of the Linux kernel, I'm doing it again, sorry. One for you, Martin. Another one for you. But if they're contributing under the GPL v2, albeit, but still, then they can't later go, actually, we want that code back. Or they could stop developing it. They could employ a load of developers, and people just think, oh, we don't need to develop it, to a point where they are the only people developing a certain point, then drop it. But that doesn't mean that other people can't then pick it up. They can never own it in that way. They can never say, this is ours, we own it all, secret source. You know, you're done, kind of thing. So I think, yeah, basically what Laura said, I mean, what are people worried about them doing in that sense?
Well, you have to ask what's their motivation. I mean, what do you all think their motivation is for doing it? They're not doing it just for a laugh or to be nice, are they?
It's where the market is. You've got to be with developers, and you've got to have open source on your side and to get to developers now. So I think that's what they're doing really well. They're recruiting some of the best developer advocates into the company at the moment.
Change of job coming up.
And you see people going there, and you're like, you know, people coming from, they've left Oracle, they've gone to Microsoft, or they've left, you know, it just is. And at the point where where they feel that it's not working out, they'll start leaving.
I mean, we see, don't we, that Microsoft are now doing MakeCode, and they put so much money behind this kids coding platform and putting it into schools.
Categorically.
And that's not something that we could ever have imagined 10 years ago, that Microsoft would actually be building an open source coding platform for kids.
I think that it's no strings as well. Yeah. And that's the main thing. I think, yeah, don't get me wrong, Dan, I felt that level of skepticism. You know I have, but I think I've seen several interviews and I researched the life out of it before I decided this one. But in all honesty, I think their attitudes have changed. I think where they came very out and said maybe they were wrong with the open source community and maybe they needed to change. And I think these last years they really have. And I think that's worth investing in. I mean, as I said, not necessarily in a way that's not, let's just take this a step at a time, but I think, you know, you said it, FOSDEM, we were both there. You know, it was Google and Microsoft. And, you know, I say to you, who do you want your evil overlord to be?
No, neither of them, really, to be honest.
Yeah, you know.
Amazon.
Yeah,
Amazon. No, I think they've
Sinclair.
invested. I think they've invested in MakeCode. They've invested in education in a way that hasn't compromised young people.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to give my opinions because I'm supposed to be moderating, but I can't help it. It seems to me that Microsoft's motivation is pretty clear. Teach kids to code, and they'll grow up, make applications, and hopefully use Azure on the back end, and they'll make some money.
Well, I was just going to say, you said, what do they want? They want more Linux VMs running on Hyper-V and all that other stuff. That's what they want, and Azure and all of that. Mm. It's a business, isn't it? All businesses, here we go, getting political now. All businesses exist to make money. Yeah. They all want to make money. They want to make more money. That's what they're there for. That's their only reason to exist. So there you go.
Yeah, but I'd probably say I'm happy with them having that when it's an optional thing. When they're kind of like, aha, here's MakeCode. Do you want to use that? Do you want to get involved in that? Do you want to optionally use these things?
Yeah, and it still gives benefits.
Yeah, I mean, it still reaps benefits.
It's when their goals align with yours, you can reap the benefits. Yeah. Will it stay like that? Probably not.
Yeah. Right, I think we've probably got time for one or two quick fire questions. Does anyone have any questions? Right, I have to do
You'll have to run over there.
I don't run.
You don't run?
No, I shall walk casually.
Okay. Saunter over and ask a question.
Hi, I'd like to ask the panel, does anyone have any knowledge of a serious alternative, open source alternative to user identity management for login purposes in a corporate environment? So to counteract the growing spread of Active Directory into the Linux world for logging into Linux machines, is there anything that that's genuinely goes in the opposite direction?
You're all looking at me. I'm not a corporate IT guy, but I don't know. The best answer I can give to that, I'm thinking of single sign-on, basically, and I don't know if that answers your problem. It probably doesn't. But I think Shibboleth's open source, isn't it? People might know that one. That's quite popular for single sign-on, but then I think it ties into like Active Directory and so on. You can use Samba, can't you, for Active Directory as a domain controller. I don't know if it's effective enough to work in a corporate environment. I've never done it on that scale. So unfortunately, I don't think I have a solid answer for that. In which case, somebody needs to build it, apparently. So,
right, another question?
Hello. I'm guessing all of you have tried to install Linux on the laptop or the desktop. I'm wondering how many of you have tried to install a custom ROM on your phones?
Custom ROM? I've done that. I used to use CyanogenMod years ago. I used other things. It's got a lot harder, though. So going back to Google again, they've made it harder and harder and harder to install anything else on an Android phone. It used to be not that hard to like flash another bootloader on it and do all the rest of it. And now they do all these things where like if you don't press a certain button when you switch it on after you flash it the first time, it reflashes itself back to the Google thing. And it's become more and more locked down.
Are you sure you're not just getting old and rubbish at it?
Maybe. I'm definitely getting old, but I don't know about getting rubbish at it, yeah.
Anyone else run custom ROMs?
I've never tried it because whenever it's stuff like that, I'm too scared because I'll just break it and then I don't really want to have to replace stuff. But I think definitely it's in the past few years it's definitely become a more lockdown thing. Like Huawei don't allow it on their phones anymore, and a lot of other companies are just not following the same thing of letting people unlock their phones and mess about with them because things are just becoming more and more locked down because that's the way things are going.
I've tried.
Yeah.
I had the same experience as you recently.
Right. I did do it years ago quite successfully for a while, but it seems to go harder. Just a very quick thing then, if serious alternatives, how many people have used Replicant, for example? That's still going, the Replicant project. It's a fork of Android. So there's one person at the back who's used Replicant, there you go. And F-Droid and stuff like that. Anyone use F-Droid? Which is, there you go, okay, so F-Droid's more popular as a free app store that works.
So I'm the only one, well, the questions for this panel have been read off my OnePlus 3T running Lineage.
Okay, there you go.
Albeit with Google Apps as well. But, you know.
With evil added.
You know, half.
I run a full Android phone, so I've got no room to criticize.
I just want it to work.
Any other questions? Oh, right at the back.
Run!
I don't run.
Well, we're back to that again. What we should have got him was like a really long pole with the mic on it. He could have gone like that. No health and safety concerns there, is there?
Hello. On mobile devices, are any of you excited for things like the Pine phone that there's actually going to be a choice of operating systems to run on? It's a small niche effort for enthusiasts, but it is going to be widely available to anyone, not just developers, early next year. So, and they're collaborating with developers of several operating systems to make sure they'll run on the device as is when it's released.
You're looking at me again. I haven't tried the Pine phone or looked at it, but I do. Well, it's not available yet. Yeah, but I haven't properly kind of looked into it yet. But I have. Have you? Okay.
Oh.
I do really like the Pine book and some of the other stuff that they're doing. Pine 64. When I was at an event last year in Edinburgh, they were showing me their KDE, the KDE Plasma stuff as a phone user experience on a tablet, a Pine tablet at the time. It looks great, but it's the same old problem of to reach end users. I had the problem of like, how do I install, I can't remember what it was, just some app, like something evil, let's say like WhatsApp, because I use that. And they were like, oh, you can't at the moment. So for most people I know, they'd be like, well, that's no use to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, they never have sold it as anything other than a phone for hackers and tinkerers.
Right, okay. No. What about the Librem 5 then, in that case? Is anybody interested in that? No? Okay. I don't know much about it. I just know that was the big hope for a free phone at one time.
If you remember, when we were at FOSDEM, we attended one, and we were talking about this, I think, on the opening day. They were saying about actually having phones and the apps that you'd want to use. It's become increasingly difficult to actually have the apps that you want on a phone that isn't one of the major, Android, or because you can't just and who was it who was speaking, one of you all? Or?
Probably Bradley or Karen
Bradley,
from the Free Software Foundation.
Software Foundation.
One of your lot.
Yeah, one of your lot. Yeah, and it was literally, she couldn't find a way without Google Maps, but she just got so sick of it.
That was Karen Sandler from Software Freedom Conservancy.
Yeah, and we were talking afterwards, and she said, I just got so sick of it that in the end, I just sort of gave in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, hopefully we've been talking about I mean, does anyone remember the green phone from years ago? Mm-hmm. That was like the Linux phone. It was like, it's the green phone and it's going to be massive, and Trolltech or whatever. And it never quite made it, unfortunately. The problem is the mobile world seems to be even more cutthroat than any other part of technology, because they're always trying to kill each other. All these people, you've got Microsoft coming in, kill Nokia, all that stuff, and then they make the teams compete with each other or inside these mobile companies. And it feels like you can be at the top 1 minute and dead within a year in the mobile industry, like completely dead.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that UbiPorts continues from where Ubuntu Touch was dropped by Canonical.
Yeah.
And there's a few phones you can put that on. You can't buy a phone with it pre-installed, I don't think, yet, but that's worth a look. But again, it's limited by the apps and stuff. That's always the problem, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it'll be a hard sell for when you're trying to sell a phone that uses Linux for like $1,000. That's kind of like reaching top-end iPhone territory.
Yeah.
And it is going to be a very limited number of people that want to spend money on a phone that costs that much and doesn't have anywhere near as good a specs as like phones at that price.
Right, we've got 2 minutes left. Keep it quick, Poppy.
Going back to the point about Microsoft being good citizens in the open source.
All right, and I should just point out this is the final session for today, but we have a social event tonight from 7 o'clock. So obviously we're going to clear out of here now, but back in here from 7, they're going to put tables in. You're going to be there is food available to order. It's from the bar, so some of you experienced that last night. If you want to get something to eat now, you've got a couple of hours, or you can come back later whenever you feel like. Help yourselves, obviously. There'll be food and drink, and we're going to have a live band on. We've got Dev Null and the Kernel Panics, who are a band of Linux engineers.
And if I get drunk enough, I might even sing.
Joe might even sing. Yeah, so thank you all for coming to the first day of OggCamp. I hope you're going to come tonight and have some fun with us. And of course, come back tomorrow if you can. That'd be